The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We continue to learn more about the identity of the suspect who allegedly, or seems pretty clear, that she opened fire at YouTube headquarters in San Bruno, California on Tuesday. And we found some of the videos that were part of her YouTube channel. We found a lot of anger and rage directed at YouTube for what she, I guess, felt was that she was being targeted by YouTube for demonetization and being encouraged not to publish videos, and it's unclear how much of it sort of was connected to reality and how much of it was disconnected to reality. And we've also learned that she was a vegan animal rights activist, and we are now seeing that animal rights and welfare organizations all say, we don't know who this person is, and that there's no actual indication that she was truly a member of the animal rights community, which I guess is not surprising. I mean, just, what does it even mean to be a vegan activist? Like, she does some videos that are not very widely seen where she promotes veganism, but I don't find it unusual, nor do I really find it dishonest that groups like PETA are saying, yeah, we don't know who this person is.
I mean, as a vegan myself, I wonder if I have to apologize for the shooting at YouTube. I know, whenever there's a Muslim perpetrator or a black perpetrator, conservatives will always say that other people in the community have to apologize for that person.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm inclined to do so.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's crazy. And, the allegation is she was associated and affiliated with PETA and Mercy for Animals and the Animal Liberation Front. And Trump, in a tweet, actually said that she was a liberal vegan PETA activist. But, it doesn't seem in any way relevant to the act that took place. Like, there are people who are unbalanced and are vegan and aren't vegan, pescatarians, vegetarians, people who eat the Mediterranean diet. There's just no, it's not inaccurate, but there's just no bearing or connection to the act.
Well, she claims that YouTube deliberately demonetized pro-vegan content because it's supposed to be damaging to the animal products industries.
Right.
And we've experienced some of that stuff too, where we think that YouTube is favoring corporate media over independent media. They'll accept CNN's coverage of a serious story, but not ours.
Sure.
There is certainly some biases there. I don't know if one applies to the animal products industry, though.
We have no evidence whatsoever to suggest that that is a bias that exists within YouTube. And really what the bias seems to come down to is that there are some brands, some media outlets that have a different relationship with YouTube, where they are basically... They have a special agreement where it's assumed that all of their content is broadcast and advertiser safe. And that's what leads to, when we do a story about a mass shooting, for example, it gets individually flagged and typically demonetized, and we can appeal it. And it's about 50-50 whether we end up getting ads back on it or not. CNN and some of those corporate and legacy media outlets have a different type of arrangement with YouTube, where they're sort of vouching that they won't publish anything that is not advertiser safe. And that includes when they talk about the same mass shootings that we get demonetized for. Can't really do anything about that. No evidence whatsoever that the veganism stuff has anything to do with this.
You think that's pretty odd, though? Because you think of vegans as peace-loving hippies, right? Who are concerned about not only animal welfare, but I guess people welfare too. And so that doesn't really seem to jive with someone going on a mass shooting spree.
It doesn't.
Certainly she was unstable. I think that's first and foremost.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, with the exception that I've heard the argument from what I consider to be a sort of extreme wing of the vegan community that in principle, they don't support violence against anybody, meaning humans or animals. But that because the animals are so much more limited in their resources to defend themselves than people, that by some internal logic, it would be justified to do violence against people who are doing violence against defenseless animals, because the animals don't have anyone to defend them. That's I don't subscribe to that, to be very, very clear. I'm saying that's something that I've heard used to rationalize animal rights violence against people.
I can understand how people would arrive at that conclusion because they see an injustice going on in the world. It's the same thing with people who are super against abortion. Some of them will justify blowing up an abortion clinic to make up for that.
Yeah.
Obviously, you shouldn't do that, and it doesn't make up for anything.
No. Yes. I think neither one of us is in favor of killing people or shooting people. I'm glad that we got that on record. The state of Utah has something interesting that is going on, which is that typically, if you just kind of let your kids go and roam free, there are circumstances in which that would be neglect and it would be against the law. It would be against state law, and you could actually be prosecuted for that. And Utah has actually become the first state in the U.S. to protect what they're calling free-range parenting, and they are redefining some parental actions that no longer count as neglect. And this includes letting kids play by themselves at a park, even at young ages, or walk to and from the park, between the park and their house, for example. And that the idea is Utah legislators want to encourage kids to start building self-reliance and independence and sort of being able to solve problems for themselves. And that thus they can't expose they don't want to expose parents to possible criminal charges just for letting their kids walk to the park in case something were to happen to the kids. And, 8 and 10-year-olds who are allowed to walk to the park by themselves, it's possible that they could have a developmental disability or just sort of lack the maturity that you might start to see in a 10-year-old or something like that. And what the law basically would do is say the parents, if anything happens to the kids, the parents just aren't guilty. They can't be charged with a crime, and we want to protect the parents in those cases. And that's why now they're talking about sort of exemptions to the law if there are known developmental disabilities. But it's starting to get very, very complex. I genuinely don't know how I feel about this because to me, it really depends on where you live. And of course, there can be bad people anywhere. People can get run over by a car no matter where they are. But depending on where you live, as a hypothetical parent, my feeling of comfort letting a kid walk to the park and back by themselves at different ages would vary, right? It would be very different in a big city versus a suburb versus a rural area, for example. I don't know.
Yeah, and it also just comes down to crime statistics. So, like, Utah ranks very low when it comes to violent crime. So I think parents would be more willing to let their kids roam free and not be concerned with, like, them getting into any trouble or getting kidnapped or anything like that. I don't know. I mean, like, it could happen. That's for sure. It could happen anywhere.
And also, you could make the case that doing something like this would make the kids targets to predators, although I'm not actually saying that I think that that's hugely likely. But there's an argument to be made that the change in the law itself could actually impact the risk level that is there. Free-range parenting. I don't know the answer to this, but I wonder how much of this, if any, is connected to Mormonism. Like, is there something, because there's a big Mormon community in Utah, is there something in the Mormon community that encourages kids to just kind of go and do their own thing, even at a young age, take care of themselves to some degree? I don't know the answer, but I wouldn't be surprised to hear that, though.
And are there lower rates of criminality and violence within that Mormon community?
That I don't know.
I think I would guess that there are lower rates.
You think so?
I think so, yeah. They seem to be very peaceful people.
I don't know, I guess. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't really know that many Mormons personally. And I don't know. I mean, I know all about the scam of their so-called sacred texts. That I'm very, very familiar with. Gold tablets and all of this other such nonsense. But as far as the Mormon community being a criminal community or a violent community, I have no idea.
It also seems to connect to, like, parents just not allowing their kids to go outside anymore. Because, like, they used to say that, well, when we were younger, the streets were just a lot safer. Yeah. And I don't know if that actually bears any fruit. I think it just has to do with, like, marketing campaigns when we started to put missing children on the front of, like, milk cartons.
Yeah.
And so, like, it was all just the perception of how dangerous the outside world is and wasn't actually backed up by facts and statistics.
I don't know how far back you're going. I mean, certainly when the automobile became a common thing, the streets definitely became more dangerous. If you're talking about violent crime.
30, 40 years ago, maybe like the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, big picture crime rates have gone down in the United States. So that probably tells us everything we need to know, broadly speaking, about those statistics. There are more than 1 million immigrants in the United States illegally who have special California driver's licenses. This is something California did about 3 years ago. The California DMV started announcing that they would provide driver's licenses to undocumented immigrants. Basically, they wouldn't be prosecuted. They wouldn't be turned in to immigration authorities because they were undocumented, and they would be allowed to have a driver's license. And as the bill says, this is Assembly Bill 60, the DMV must issue a driver's license if the applicant can prove that they live in California, that they are who they say they are. In other words, they have to be able to prove their identity, and they need to meet the testing requirements, regardless of whether they're in the country lawfully. The argument from the left on this, and from some sort of common sense people on the right, is, listen, you're not going to deport everybody. There are laws in many cities where you're not even allowed to ask about immigration status. So even though you might say, if you came to the country illegally, you sure as hell shouldn't be driving a car legally on principle, the pragmatic side of you at some point needs to take over, hopefully, and you say, okay, wait, they're going to be driving, and we're not going to deport them all. So aren't we all better off if we say, come in and get a driver's license, get tested, let's figure out, I assume they do a vision test, let's figure out if your eyesight is good enough to be driving without glasses or contact lenses or whatever. It's a sort of harm reduction. It's similar to what exists in many other areas of public health, which is, sure, here might be the ideal on principle that we might aspire to, but given the fact that we're going to be operating somewhere lower than that, what can we do to make the driving as safe as possible? And this is a program that sort of goes in that direction.
Right, and if an undocumented immigrant gets into an accident, I think they're going to be a lot less likely to try to get away with it, to drive away.
Sure.
Because, you know, if the cops come, they're going to be worried about getting deported. Whereas, you know, if they have everything in order and they have a driver's license, maybe they would just have to obviously deal with whatever they caused,
sure,
but nothing further than that.
Yeah, even in a traffic stop situation, if you don't have a license because you're not allowed to have one because you're in the country illegally, and a cop starts to pull you over, it is statistically more likely that you might try to evade police and be involved in a high-speed chase, which starts to put all sorts of different people at risk. Like in every single sense, this is a program that to me is logical, although people on the right absolutely hate it. They say it's government money that's going into, you know, the testing and licensing for people that shouldn't even be in this country, deport them all, it's terrible. But whatever your moral view on it is, it's just not a practical view.
I think it's totally logical and totally pragmatic. I just worry that it plays into this conservative idea that liberals aren't taking undocumented immigration seriously enough. And, you know, that could be used for any sort of argument on the right, I think. Valid or not valid.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to use anything they can to try to point to how liberals are just not tough on this issue. I don't think that that's different, and I don't think it's a good reason to change the policy to the extent that it's been hugely successful. Send me your thoughts. If you believe that there is a left-wing argument, a progressive argument, against the undocumented licensing program in California, email in, tweet me, whatever, and we'll follow up about it on an upcoming show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.